Hey, how's it going, everybody? So I just listened to an interview here with Free Talk Live and Christopher Chase Rachels, and the talk was about whether or not someone should support presidential candidates with an endorsement, especially if you're a voluntarist or ANCAP. And I really found that the arguments saying that one shouldn't, I found them to be wanting. I will preface this that I understand a critique of this. I think for me that's most valid is that if you endorse a person, and that person ends up doing things that are contrary to core principles of liberty, or goes off the rails in some way, that could be distracting. But there's something about presidential election cycles that is unique, and I feel like as if Christopher has not taken a serious look, an academic look, into the effects of people's possibilities for awareness, growth, and move into activism for liberty because of an election year. And one of the things I think that's a really great point of this is for example, Ron Paul. And it just really kind of boggles my mind to think that one couldn't look at Ron Paul's presidential campaigns in 2008 and 2012 as nothing more than the quintessential example of why it could be useful to endorse a presidential candidate, why it could be useful to spread the news about a campaign, which is effectively, sharing a form of support. Even if you didn't say, I, have a stamp and, certify that I endorse this person. Someone says, hey, look, Ron Paul's running for president, check this out, and they share it. If other people in your circle see that, they might be curious in a way that they wouldn't otherwise normally care throughout the course of the years. And whether you like that or not, it doesn't really matter. The question should be what is, and what is the ultimate outcome. And from what I've seen and what I've studied, I really don't see what better way you can reach people with things that might otherwise just be tuned out than during a presidential election year. Many people are completely inactive, don't really even care to think much about it until that time. And yes, it's been built in by, the government indoctrination systems. They get everybody psyched up and rallied for that, cycle. But so what? It's what is. You can't really pretend like it's not actually happening. And there's this, comment that, that money spent or time spent in promoting such a candidate could be better used for other things. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, well, compared to what? Because in anything with philosophy, economics, analysis, history, it should always be compared to what? Compared to what? How would people in the aggregate with their time and money have been alerted to something for investigation purposes that would lead to some sort of change or action over time? I mean, I'm open to hearing what those possibilities could be, but personally, again, this is a very strict type of market and awakening and awareness cycle that doesn't fit the bill for anything else. This isn't like, oh, you could be supporting the Mises Institute, or, you could have supported Students for Liberty or something like that. This is something about raising awareness at a foundational level. People who might not otherwise really care too much, but suddenly election year comes around and maybe they feel like, things are just not going right. What is wrong? And in sharing that message, possibly from sharing the message of a certain candidate, people suddenly can become exposed to information that would not otherwise, have been accessed because someone just wouldn't want to deal with it. That's the reality of the socioeconomics. You can't pretend like as if there isn't a material change in alertness and receptiveness with the public at large during that cycle, during that 4-year, culmination cycle. And I mean, gosh, if you were paying attention during the Ron Paul campaigns at all, you would have seen major blimps being flown around with, who is Ron Paul news, billboards and ads and crazy stuff that was just like beyond. People did drop, tons of money on the Ron Paul campaigns with money bombs and all this other stuff and promotions, but that worked. When people, painted their Corvettes or painted the sides of the vans and did these crazy things to say, who is Ron Paul, Google Ron Paul, and people did. The Google Analytics metrics are there. You can go historically search it up. People started Googling who is Ron Paul. When they did, they started reading his materials. They started saying, who is this presidential candidate? What is this person about? And that changed a lot of people's minds. It did. Whether or not you think it was a huge change or anything like that, again, compared to what? Compared to what was 15 years ago, 20 years ago, yeah, that was huge. If you went from, okay, maybe there's like, I don't know, 100,000 people who would truly identify around the world as voluntarist or ANCAP, and then after that, now suddenly, it's going tenfold. That's a big change. Yeah, okay, it's not, changing any election cycles in the United States for the total voting demographic, but it's changing the amount of people who are actually starting to be alert and starting to shift their views, and that starts to ripple. And so, to this whole thing of like, oh, it's a waste of time, like endorsing presidential candidates, yeah, I mean, it can be. It can be a waste of time, potentially. But realistically, when it comes to saying, okay, promote candidates who actually support, articulate the principles of liberty, use it as an opportunity to get people, just to read it or check it out who might have not otherwise, I really don't see how that is a poor choice of one's time or one's action when it is leading to just that, leading to more awareness, leading to more research by people who might not have otherwise been open or receptive. I don't see something that is parallel or corollary to that specific venue, something that could produce a type of eliciting of interest. And yeah, if you want to say, okay, complete replacement, a different type of educational thing or this or that, okay, maybe, but okay, that happens. There is. It's working. Students for Liberty organizations, Generation Opportunity. You could even say America's Prosperity. There are groups and stuff like that. And of course, those aren't ANCAP voluntarist groups. I'm just saying there are groups that are libertarian leaning to straight up, really libertarian, like Students for Liberty, who are doing that work. But why is it that opportunity should be, left alone? It just doesn't make any sense. There's just opportunities across the board, and they all could have value. They all could have potential value in terms of waking people up. And so really, if you're going to make an argument about this, I'd say at the end of the day is like, at least make some really hard evidence arguments, like the numbers, as far as activism and leading to people that suddenly identify. I can't see it not being worthwhile when you consider the effects of the Ron Paul movement, and you consider the effects of what's happening with the major candidates now, when after, Ted Cruz dropped out and all this other stuff, suddenly people are looking at the Libertarian Party and stuff like that and just checking out other options. The fact that existed as an alternative for people to suddenly search up and see what's going on and to hear some of those principles is a great thing. If nobody did anything about that, if nobody, put any effort or time into that, then people be like, there's no other option. And sure, you could say maybe they'll make that magical leap of like going all the way to like voluntarism and, ANCAP, whatever. But really, is that really how most people, if you were to ask them how they had their journey to there? If I don't see that. I see most people as, by and large, having started at some mainline position that they were brought up with in their home life, or that was what they got because they went to public school or whatever, and then eventually they saw something that wasn't making sense or something wasn't right, or they realized maybe, hey, these politicians keep saying this, these things and then doing the opposite. And then eventually started to do research, and they found more stuff, and they were slowly able to move out of indoctrination and misinformation and start to understand philosophy and ethics. That's what I see. I do not see anybody who, was suddenly, oh yeah, I'm a big R, big D, and next moment they're like, nope, this all this stuff out the window. I'm all of a sudden, just done with it. A black flag anarchist or something like that. Like it's all just flipped. You know what I mean? It just doesn't really happen, especially for those who really understand the ethics elements of voluntarism and the economics of anarcho-capitalism. I mean, those are things of serious study, and people who are serious intellectuals about those things tend to have come from at least somewhat of a background where they would discuss politics in some way or policies in some way. The people who take this stuff seriously, who don't just flake in and out, take time to have their minds change because they have to think through it. They have to work through it. And I don't see how that happens unless there are people who are ready and able to speak to these kinds of people at whatever intermediate stage. And so I'm thankful for the people that aren't always, there, the people who are in the middle of the road, because it allows some people who are not going to just run right to the end to have opportunities as stepping stones to say, okay, yeah, more liberty, that makes sense. Okay, well, I like, these economic arguments, maybe Milton Friedman or something like that, or I like what, someone maybe like Thomas Sowell's writing or something, and then all of a sudden they read more and they hear about, hey, have you heard about this? Something with, I don't know, Mises or Hayek or something like that, and all of a sudden they're reading the next thing, they're reading the next thing. Most people don't just go from one extreme to the other, especially someone who's grounded in their understandings. And to me, the political process is just one more of those outlets for voices to be heard, for debates to be had, and for minds to be changed. And sure, there are things that I personally would rather spend my time and money on than the election. Absolutely, I already do. But to say that, it's not valuable, or, there isn't a place for that, I just can't go out on a ledge and endorse that kind of thinking. I think an all means approach, every level, every avenue, go at it. More liberty, the better. More freedom, the better. So that's just my 2 cents on Chase Rachel's 2 cents with endorsements. Again, I think there is a critique potentially, of course, if that person goes off the rails who someone endorses, but by and large, we're talking about a narrow scope of time, a narrow frame of time when people are engaged and listening and searching, and it's rare. And if someone's not there, this discourse isn't happening, and the interest isn't happening, there are people who are going to miss out on that, especially when they're wondering, are these really the only options out there? There has to be something that can bridge the gap for people to begin the process. So thanks, everybody, for listening, and I'll talk to you